Privileged treatment for the children. Willy? Willy? You had a question, right?
No, I just have the wish if we can get the slides of the 3 presentations of today, and how can we get them? I mean, I know Marieke, I just connected to Bharat over the LinkedIn, and I could not find Christine, unfortunately. So, but maybe also others are interested in the slides and not only me. So maybe somebody can handle that. That would be nice.
If Christine and Bharat could put their emails in the chat, then at least everybody who can see the chat, which I think is everyone, will be able to get it.
Thank you.
I have one question, Dr. Raju Shukla. If Marik is there, yeah?
I think she's still coming back.
Okay. So this question is for Marik.
Oh, she's here. Somewhere.
Christian, is you?
So the question is for Marika, is that right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Ah. She says she has no microphone, but can respond in the chat.
Oh, so I can use that.
Yeah.
So if you can ask the question, perhaps.
Yeah. The question is that Bharat has shared that the impact of that culture aspects, and Marik has taken the 3 levels of that learners and participants. So where did you incorporated this individual aspects of learner in your model?
I missed part of the question because I could join as panelist now. Sorry about that. So could you repeat the last part? Because I got the first part.
Yeah, actually that Bharat has discussed about the impact of the culture on the games. So the question is that you have incorporated the model. So in the model of the learners, you have classified the three categories. So where you have incorporated this, the impact of the individual characteristics of the learner in your model.
Yeah. Because it's qualitative research, I look at characteristics of participants, and I have a list of that. And one of the important things is I've noticed due to this long research is that if they have had a different cultural background, or have had worked in different cultures, or had school in different cultures, they are more learning resilient. So learning resilience, that if they get frustrated in learning or over challenged, they keep calm and they keep responsive to feedback, and they learn longer and more. So one of the relevant participant characteristics is that, and also people that play a lot of games, they have this game literacy, but it's actually systems competence. So looking at the whole, what's happening here, no stress, there is uncertainty, there is complexity, there's things I don't know, but I can still learn, see, observe, and experiment. And Jacques Hertz calls this systems competence, and I like that better than game literacy, because I think it's the same thing, but it is also more holistic. I don't know if that answers the question.
This is very interesting. Thank you.
Marika, just to add to what you talked about systems competency, right? Another element that becomes key over there is how they grapple with uncertainty. Because if they are comfortable with uncertainty, if they're comfortable with incomplete information, then their openness to experiment jumps drastically. Their openness to new things jumps drastically. Whereas if either one of the others drops, we've seen that the game has to become a much more closed game. Open world games don't work well with such participants for obvious reasons, right?
Yeah. And I understand what you're saying. And usually then we start with rule-based and generally let go the rules.
Yeah. And also the final, when you say generally as we go as rules, right? I think with gaming simulations, another element is if you're designing this, for example, as a learning or a training tool that the participants use a number of times, then that gradual progression that you're talking about is possible. But in many contexts, they use it only once a year, for example, or they only play this once.
Yeah, but it also is possible if you have multiple game rounds. So if you make possible,
so if you have those game rounds, then it's possible. Yeah. Otherwise, then you have to design the game itself substantially different, because if you're using it to collect data, for example, or test scenarios as we do in the policy context, we have to design the game
always
itself.
Happens. Learning always happens.
Learning always happens.
Whatever you
how you design these artifacts has to change substantially.
Any other question?
Oh, suddenly they've dried up.
Now, I would like to invite today's session chair, Dr. Paula, for her concluding remarks.
Okay, it's really a challenge to close this session because it's so full of inspiring things, and I think that you point the finger in all of three of you point the finger in the complexity word of let's say the holistic complex word of gaming simulation. From the, let's say, you pointed out what is the role of narrative and the surprise. I mean, all the game designer and game players know about, facilitators, sorry, they really are keen to apply such kind of narrative also in the game. And I found, you know, so cute Mrs. Conway speech, because I am fond of mystery and I use it in explaining urban planning development. So you can see how the narrative for my students is quite, you know, a challenge. What is this crazy teacher that is talking about Agatha Christie, and I use Christie's usually, and then the urban development. And this is one thing. Talking about the contributions of Marieke and Bharat, I think that you are really close to my way of doing things. I think that you explain two different things. One is what is your final goal? To obtain something like in urban planning domain, or is the learning effect, the process itself, like in Marieke? And I think it was really wonderful to see these two combined together, you know. That's really important, because we forgot so often that we are so self-looking to our games. So I think that all the contribution today were, I'll say, a big inspiration for all of us. And I would like to thank you for not only for your contribution, for the passion. Without passion, we do not play anything. Without passion, you know, we don't have any kind of game. We cannot use games without emotion. We cannot use gaming simulation without a thing to the data, to the results, to the process. So I would like really to thank you. I'm sorry, I was looking for a quotation by Huizinga that explained quite well what you have done today. I'm sorry, I cannot find it. I will post somewhere. So thank you again for your contribution, and I wish good work for the further thing. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Paula. I would like to thank today's keynote speaker, Anuj Garg, for his nice presentation. Further, I would like to thank today's session chair, Dr. Paula Rizzi, for her contribution. I would like to thank all three speakers, Marike Weispan Hezbek, Christine Gurney, and Bharat M. Palavalli. Thank you all for wonderful sessions. Thank you.
Thank you everyone, as we're running out of time. So now we start our next session, that is technical session. Abhishek, please start third session.
Very good afternoon to all the respected dignitaries. Dr. Upinder Dhar sir, Honorable Vice Chancellor Shri Vaishnav Vidyapith Vishwavidyalaya, Dr. Vinod Tamlekarji, CEO and Founder, Mantis, New Delhi, India, Dr. Jigyasu Dubey, Head Department of Information Technology, Shri Vaishnav Institute of Information Technology, Shri Vaishnav Vidyapith Vishwavidyalaya, respected Head of Institutes, Head of Departments, and their participants. It's my pleasure to welcome the session chair, Professor Dr. George Thomas. He is the director, Shri Vaishnav Institute of Management, Indore, Madhya Pradesh. I'd like to welcome you, sir. And Dr. Thomas has been engaged in the teaching, research, corporate training, consultancy work for the last 25 years. His past assignments have been Professor, Director, Chandigarh Business School of Business Administration, Mohali, Punjab. He is the Dean of School of Management and Studies, Baddi, University of Engineering and Sciences, Himachal Pradesh, and the Founder Director of School of Management, Maharaja Agrasen University, Himachal Pradesh. He has published several research articles in the national and international journals of repute and authored one book and edited 5 books. He has designed and conducted many management development programs for the executive for the corporate houses. His six research scholars have been awarded PhD under his supervision. So I like to welcome you, sir. Sir, shall we start the session?
Yes, please.
So I will call one by one each participants with their paper ID. So there will be a total 10 minutes of the session for each paper, out of which 8 minutes to discuss your idea and 2 minutes to discuss the question answering session. So the first paper ID is 121. So the paper ID is 121. WHE CMAX facilitating training simulations for health emergency and the personal. So dear participants, please share your screen. Sorry about that. Just a moment. Here we go. So, hello everyone, Tuomas Harviainen here. I am presenting here the work of one of my doctoral students, Ms. Heini Utunen from the World Health Organization's Health Emergencies Program. And she works especially on field information sharing in medical emergencies. And in this case, the ways in which simulations are used to train facilitators in the field and to train experts and to have them train people further on in the processes. So this is from the Learning and Capacity Development Unit, the work. And I'm going to run very quickly through the kind of simulations that are used in these circumstances. The paper will explain more, and then we will be actually publishing more research on the effects and so forth in the coming years. So this is a kind of a cornerstone introduction to the work. And please, if you have questions, have those in the chat, because I unfortunately cannot stay until the end of the entire session. I have a thesis workshop to run right after this presentation. So the basic principles at the WHE are for training exercises that people can apply knowledge that they get from classroom sessions. So the kind of training, but also improvisation in situation kind of approach to knowledge construction here. So as you note, apply knowledge from classroom sessions, deepen learning
but then also under pressure with little or no information and with multiple demands. So we are focusing here especially on kinds of role play sessions that are facilitated in a way that makes the people apply the knowledge in action. So it's not as if the goal of the simulation itself is additional learning, it's more about demonstration of learning, but also peer review learning and the fact that the facilitators are able to provide information based on feedback and on the spot assessment. In the article, we present 4 elements of facilitation here. So the facilitators receive planning to reinforce the content. So a kind of runtime game mastering approach to making sure that certain elements come up, or if they do not, then assessing why this happened. Then role-play design and instructions to use the facilitator's expert knowledge in transfer. Then competency-based assessment, to which I will come shortly, in and after the SimX experience, and then the feedback that I already mentioned. What we have here is the very common structure of briefing, play, and debriefing. Typically, the normal runtime has been 6 days in total, with the idea of 2 + 2 + 2. And as you can see from the figure, we have applications, analysis, and evaluation at the same time taking place. So the person who is running the simulation is also assessing it during and after. And how this is done is a very structured format based on first the prompts that are introduced during the play. So here is one example. You have the competencies listed here, the learning objectives, session roles, which the facilitator or assisting personnel can play, and then the scenario background. And this sort of demonstrates that here, as with many other role-playing scenarios, we really have to work with the approach that's quite contrary to what we've recently here heard, the idea that we in fact have to write the backstory very explicitly because we cannot control the sort of plot twists or turns of events that are taking place. Of course, the runtime game mastering enables some control over this, but in general, it's a kind of a front-loaded situation. And this is why we need to be aware of the learning objectives and the assessed competencies from beforehand so that we can make sure that they are present here. This is exactly what Lander says about having the educational content present in any gamified activity if we want to rely on actually delivering the elements. The work is assessed based on what the WHE calls the 6 core competencies, which you can see here. So knowledge, skills, attitudes, belief, actions, and so forth. A special focus is on expertise, communication, teamwork, partnerships, which can be present in certain scenarios, but are not in others, and then leadership. And here we have the kind of scoring process. So whether these are demonstrated performances and at which level, which means that the people who are deploying these scenarios are first themselves taught to use these elements, and they are checked that they have the necessary competencies in order to be able to then assess the other ones. So it's trained faculty who observe whether by participating or as personnel in addition to being present. This is currently being piloted in 4 trainings, and the numbers that we report in the article are already much higher and are climbing up very efficiently at the time. Here we have an example for you on how the assessment is guided. Again, let me remind that these are meant to be done so that people can also run these without earlier guidance, so that these can be deployed in the field for the use forward by people who have been trying out these techniques themselves. So here are the competency texts, the competencies which are in focus in this case, and then we have expertise points and also questions that can be asked in order to foster sufficient reflection. And to make sure that these are efficient, the structure of feedback has been structured so that people can apply different elements at different stages of the process. So here you have the examples. The paper explains much more on these. So in briefings to eventual team briefings, individual debriefings, out briefings, which are very different in this case. So you can have a sort of exit discussion and then a reflective talk later on and so forth. But we also pay attention to any feedback or reactions that take place during play, which is something that I personally think is completely underappreciated in the study of educational role-playing. However, the situation has, of course, changed significantly. Face-to-face scenarios have not been a possibility, and on the other hand, it's been necessary to deploy new learning tools in the current pandemic. So this is what is now happening, and which we will be publishing more research on quite soon. So virtual simulation exercises using the same principles with 1,000 users, many designers, and so forth, adapted to the scenarios that are chosen, which can be, as was mentioned, importantly, culturally contextualized, and so forth. This is one of the elements that has been in the design goals from early on, so can be applied to other countries and so forth. And this also includes specially tailored interventions that can be entered into the scenarios by either facilitator participation or other means. And with this, I end my talk.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any questions from the panelists? Any questions from panelists, session chair, sir?
If not, then thank you. My student explains the points a lot clearer in the actual paper, so enjoy that one.
Thank you.
Lovely to see it coming along, Thomas.
Okay, so the next paper is paper ID 131, Between Urban Resilience and Serious Gaming, Applying Games for the Policy Implementation.
Good morning. It's Weronika Szatkowska from Koźmiński University. All right, please let me know if my presentation is visible.
Not yet. Now it is.
Okay, Is it fine?
Yes, yes.
Thank
it's
you very
visible.
much. Okay, great to know that. So today I would like to tell you a few words about urban resilience and serious gaming in the context of policy implementation. So just beginning, I have to say that cities can be treated as complex systems, meaning that there are many interacting elements. For instance, actors, also elements of infrastructure, etc. Therefore, I have to say that urban resilience assumes that cities are capable of self-organizing and adapting to changes, like meaning different changes. So policies in this context are just crucial to manage the city. Therefore, people who rule the city, they have to answer many questions. For instance, how to measure, benchmark, and plan for resilience, how to implement and operationalize new solutions, also how to engage citizens in managing the city, and how to break the silos. For instance, silos between different sectors, let's say banking, NGOs, industry, etc. Therefore, we asked ourselves how serious games can contribute to policy implementation, because as you may well think, implementation of new policies may be quite difficult in complex environment of cities. So we decided to conduct systematic review in order to research games that supported somehow implementation of policies for urban resilience. So the structure of the review was quite simple, because we started with initial search in databases. Then, of course, we established exclusion criteria. The next step was the pre-selection of articles. Then, of course, initial screening. Then we applied inclusion criteria, and in total we had 22 articles. Also, we found 2 articles based on a snowball method. In terms of inclusion criteria, what was very important, some games for urban resilience. Well, firstly, we're looking for games that support implementing resilience, and we also were looking for articles that refer openly to this perspective. Moreover, we chose games which are applied in urban setting, like not in every region, but like strictly in cities. And of course, we needed sufficient information about games. What was problematic sometimes, there were, for instance, like metaphorical uses of keywords, and yeah, and sometimes keywords were randomly mentioned, so we have to clear that. So what we discovered, first of all, there were main topics like community resilience, which is the resilience of certain communities in the city. Then there was climate change and adaptation. So there were games mostly contributing to resilience in terms of climate changes. Then we found games on just general urban resilience, meaning like resilience of whole the city, addressing problems of different groups, and also, let's say, infrastructure, health, etc. And disaster resilience, meaning like this strict resilience to like big problems, disasters like flooding, for instance, or drought, and others, for instance, let's say resilient tourism. Okay, what were goals related to those subjects? So as you see with the green color, for instance, I underlined goals that were the most common. So as you see, understanding the complexity and the concept was very important, because resilience is not clear for many people, for citizens. But if we want to stay resilient, then we have to be aware that we are interdependent. So those games, they were explaining that problem. Also, knowledge transfer was very important. Those games were quite often like knowledge oriented. Also, those games were aiming to increase situational awareness, meaning that they wanted to inform people that they may be endangered, but also they are responsible for solving the problem. And there were, of course, other goals, for instance, improving collaboration between stakeholders, risk preparedness, testing future scenarios, or supporting decision-driven approach. Like, but of course they were like different for different topics. In terms of participants, what was alarming for us? Well, you can see that citizens, there were like problems of citizens, and in general, citizens were quite often engaged in games, meaning that games were designed to inform them, engage, etc. Also, it happened to students because some games, of course, were dedicated to students, and some of them, of course, engaged decision makers, but in many cases, business representatives, NGOs, and researchers were not involved, what is very problematic because city consists also of those people who should actively engage in building resilience. So in general, in the future, it is worth to focus on engaging those individuals. For instance, in community resilience or in informing about general urban resilience. Evaluation. So it should be underlined that in most of cases, the debriefing results were very promising, meaning that short-term goals were frequently accomplished. As we can see in the previous slide, for example, it was assumed that people should be introduced with new solutions, the knowledge should be transferred, and situational awareness should be also improved. And it was, of course, checked after games, but unfortunately, systematic review and feedback after like longer period of time was missing. It means that nobody, I would like to underline that in the group of 22 games, nobody checked what happens to the knowledge, to the attitudes, behavior of people after a longer period. It was checked only after the gameplay. On the other hand, what should be underlined, cities are complex systems, therefore it's quite hard. And in general, implementing policy making is new policies is quite complex phenomenon. So it's hard to check like what was the impact of the game and what was impact of like general or maybe of different means. So to sum up, what was the contribution to policy implementation? So firstly, thanks to serious games, there were strategic documents created that supported implementation of policies. Also, skills and attitudes critical for implementation were enhanced. So games in general were good for training those skills which are crucial for urban resilience. Also, new implementation outcomes were discovered. So people could test what may happen if we act like this or that. Also, some shortages and future challenges of policies were introduced and were discussed. And of course, the awareness of policy was improved as well. But just to finish in this the presentation, I would like to underline that games were more or less important supplements for policy implementation. They were not crucial means to implement policies on urban resilience. Yeah. So thank you very much for your attendance. And if you have any questions, I'm eager to answer. Thank you.
Very nice presentation, Veronica, and I congratulate you for this.
Thank you.
I have a small question. One is creating awareness about serious gaming. What do you understand by serious gaming? Mm-hmm. Because gaming is again is taken as a understanding any concept through fun. But the word serious is added in this. So how do we differentiate gaming and serious gaming? Yeah.
Well, we treated serious gaming as gaming with like not only entertainment purposes. So we are looking for games that are not primary for having fun, but those that are dedicating to achieve some more important goals, and in this case, those goals were related to urban resilience and increasing awareness, or let's say building other capacities to improve urban resilience. So games, they were just means to improve the situation of citizens and the state of cities.
Okay, thank you. And the second question is, like you have very nicely, implemented also. You got sufficient material for policy implementation, for framing the policy related to various aspects. How these games are prepared, like climate, you have mentioned community resilience game. So how those content is being developed?
Well, I have to say that there were like different types of games, and in the article it's possible to see, for example, what kinds of games there were, because there were either board games, also mobile applications. So they are very different, and they are really context specific. So it's hard to answer like how they are developed. Well, I can say that they are mostly developed based on the needs of, let's say, communities. So firstly, those needs of communities and like shortages for policy implementation were assessed, and then based on that requirement, those games were developed. I don't know if if this answer is sufficient for you, because like it's a very wide subject, and each game was very specific. They are described in the article, but I don't want to take more time, because I can imagine there are more panelists willing to present.
Thank you. Thank you, Veronica.
Thank you very much for your questions.
Yes, thank you. Shall we move on to the next?
Yes, sir. So the next paper is paper ID 136, knowledge sharing game for the sustainable restaurant management.
Can you see my slide?
Yeah, visible.
Can you see my slide?
Yeah, visible.
Yes, yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes,
Thank
it
you.
is visible.
Thank you.
It is visible, yes.
Thank you very much. Oh, can I start my presentation?
Sure.
Okay.
Please go ahead.
It is a great opportunity to have a talk about our recent research topics, and today's topics is the design of knowledge sharing game for sustainable restaurant management. And my name is Mizuho Sato, and today I'm practicing from Japan. And so this is my presentation agenda. And so first, it is now pandemics of COVID-19, and so our lifestyle has changed a lot. For example, refrain from the going out, and we have to stay at home, and refrain from the store sales. And in Japan, we are still state of emergency, so the restaurant is closed at 8 p.m. And so we have to keep the social distance, and we have to wear a mask if you go outside or talk with the other people. And so our government said avoid the 3 Cs. So what meaning for the 3S is like this figure. And so first one is a closed space with poor ventilation. And second one is a crowded place with many people nearby. And the third one is a close contact setting, such as close range conversation. So we have to avoid for these three situations. But in the restaurant, this picture is I took 2017. This is our lab members, and we sit very nearby. And if you drink and eating, and we talk many times. But now it's difficult to eat dinner or lunch this way. And COVID-19 affect many influence various industry, but in the great impact on the restaurant business, because we can't eat dinner or lunch same style before COVID-19. And this is the impact of the lesson of the COVID-19 in Japan. And this data from the Japan Food Service Association. And this data is year-on-year of the sales and customer unit price. And so here is 2020. And 2020, the sales are the lowest since 1994. And but this data is only including chain store. So there is not including small restaurant, it means a private owner restaurant. So in fact, I think the sales is more lower than this slide. So we focusing on the restaurant management on this time. And so next is a literature review. I pick up 2 literature of the restaurant management. And one is a Japanese case, and Hattori, they research on the problem of restaurant management. And in Japan, many companies have recognized the need for state labor, but most people is working in Japanese restaurant is part-time job, for example, a student or housewife. So the turnover rate is very high. And so he suggests in this paper, so in order to decrease the turnover rate is a job certification is very important. And so what is needed is good communicate with employee and owner is very important. And this is Chowdhury. I think this case in India, and employee sharing knowledge will have a positive impact on the restaurant management, reflect on the aspects such as new menu development. So it is important not only to communicate with the employee, but also to utilize their knowledge from aspect of the restaurant management. And next one is we focus in the food waste and food loss problem. This problem is not only the restaurant, but this issue is very important for the recently. If you think about sustainable food supply chain system, and this is also Japanese case, and Kobayashi or Tsuda, they research of what happened. What the kind of food waste happen in the restaurant, and leftover food is very high in the restaurant, but it is very difficult to reduce the leftover food by a company effort alone because this problem is customer side. So what is important is we need to good communicate with employee and customer side. And this one is Hoschini. I think this research is focusing in the Italy school meal, and food waste is point is the ingredient such as bread or if you're cutting or cooking time or something, and also they suggest the geographical location of the school, and but these focus in the food waste in the restaurant side, but the effect of reduction of food waste method has not been studied. So this is our game. Purpose of this game is develop a game system that applies the mechanism of the prediction market to solicit idea from employee for recovery of sales of small restaurant and effective use of ingredient, including the reduction food waste with COVID-19 scenario. And we hope to utilize this prediction market model as a communication tool between employee and the customer. And this is the outline of the game. So we have already proposed a gamification approach of sharing knowledge among employees with utilize the mechanism of prediction market at 2019. And so this game is, here is owner. So owner provide the idea. And here is the other people. This is the employee or the customer at the restaurant. And for example, these people check the owner idea, and they said, "Oh, this is a very good idea. So I think this idea will be succeed." So and they buy a win security. but they think, oh, this is no good idea. So I think this is not succeed. So they buy lose security. So
excuse me, sorry to interrupt.
Yes.
Please try to conclude. We are running out of time.
Can I continue?
Yeah, please try to conclude.
Okay, and point is if they buy win and lose security, and they have to give the comment, and this comment help with the reason for the prediction. And we play many times, and we do several times these things, and on a proposal will lead to succeed. And then we can find out a success story using this game. So this time we focusing on the knowledge sharing game for sales recovery at the restaurant. So we have from step 1 to step 3. So step 1 is we have to interview for the restaurant owner, what is the problem. And then we focus on issue and aspects that have not been visualized. And then we set the sales target, and we use the game for the step 3. And almost the same the step as for reducing food waste problem. So first time we interview for the owner or the employee about the food waste problem. And then we focus on the issue and aspects that have not been visualized, and set the goal, and using the knowledge sharing game. So if you do this game, and what is expect effect is we think this point in Japan, and we have not only big lesson, we have a lot of small lesson, and there are various type of small lesson, and they are run by limited number of people, so their daily operation are difficult to visualize. But we use this game, and by using daily operation, we can analyze current issue and use them as a reference for subsequent business opportunity. And employee have some opinion, but it's difficult to say to the owner. But if we use this game, very easy to communicate, and the employee can say their opinion and using this game. So I think this is helpful, say employee opinion. And by combining the idea with opinion on various people to improve the implement them, positive effect can be expected on employee motivation for work. So I said in one literature in Japan, the turnover rate is very high, but I think you play the game and the turnover rate will be decreased. And we also focus on the food waste problem and visualizing the current situation target with the cause of occurrence, and proposing idea for waste reduction method will be helpful for the other restaurant as well, and also lead to consumer education. So not only one restaurant, but I hope this idea is correct, and it is continue to reduce the food waste at the other restaurants. And yes, and so thank you for listening.
It was a nice presentation, Dr.
Thank
Mizuho.
you very much.
I have a question.
Yes, please.
Like, by using this knowledge sharing games,
yes,
what is the percentage effect on the food waste and sales recovery? Like how much percentage has the sales gone up and the waste gone down? Do we have any studies that?
You know, sorry, this is a now design, so we don't have a play the game, so I'm not sure how much percent will be decrease the food waste, or how much percent increase sales rate. But a good point is people still not employee and customer can communicate. So this is I think this is a good point to use in the game. But the percentage is very difficult to answer now. Sorry.
Okay, very nice, very nice. Thank you, Dr. Mizuho. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Next, please.
Okay, it's a paper ID 123. Why do people play mobile games?
Good morning, everyone. I just need a second to share my screen. Can you see my presentation right now?
Yes, absolutely clear.
Okay, so I understand I can start.
Yeah, please go ahead.
My name is Małgorzata Ćwir. I'm from Koźmiński University. I'm here in Warsaw, in Poland. And today I'm going to tell you about the research that we conducted together with Daft Mobile Company. This is a Polish company that develops mobile games. And the main question that we were trying to answer during the research is, why do people play mobile games? And the gaming industry is booming nowadays. When it comes to revenues, actually, almost 50% of revenues, these are the revenues from mobile gaming. And the share is even higher in developing countries or between younger people. For example, when we talk about Generation Z. And year-to-year growth is really, really high. And during the last presentation, we saw a really negative impact of COVID-19 on restaurants. It is completely the other way around when it comes to gaming industry. So in 2020, we saw a big increase of the number of games downloaded or the time that people spend playing games, especially mobile gaming. And during the research that I'm talking about, we try to answer the question, which factors influence mobile players' experience and their intention to replay the game. But also, not only we try to answer this question, but also our aim was to design tools which make it possible to answer those kind of questions in any kind of games. Not only mobile gaming, any kind of game. According to literature review, there are different factors that do actually influence player experience, such as positive emotions, for example, perceived level of skills, challenge, immersion, flow, and we designed a quasi-experiment in which we measured those variables. A Pong game was designed especially for this experiment. This is a really simple game. However, what was really important for us was that this was a player versus player real-time game. So only participants of these experiments were playing against each other. It is a really fast-paced gameplay, so it didn't take too much time for one gameplay. Each of the participants were asked to play at least 10 times. However, they play much longer, and they really, after a few gameplays, because the learning curve is really steep, it is quite easy to succeed in this game. Participants just started playing longer and longer with more people, with more opponents. So we gathered data from the gameplays, as well as at the end of the gaming session, participants were asked to fill the questionnaire, and that is how we gathered the data. Our conceptual framework, as you can see, was to check how which of the components build player experience, especially focusing on challenge, emotions, flow, immersion skills. Player experience itself, it was a latent variable in our model. Each of the constructs challenge, emotions, flow, and so on. It consisted of a few questions in our questionnaire. The level of Cronbach alpha was satisfactory for all of them, so we included 5 variables that explain player experience, as well as we wanted to check whether there is a significant relation between player experience and their intention to reply a certain game. This is the mathematical model and also our hypothesis about 5 subconstructs. And one hypothesis about the impact of player experience itself on the replay intention. More than 100 people took part in our experiment. So these were the people that were gathered at one time playing a certain game. Young people, mostly students from our university, aged from 18 to 26. More or less half of them men and women, mostly playing on iOS system. However, the game was you could play on every phone, every system. And according to the data that we gathered, we found out that at least in this particular game, which is a really simple game, there are 3 main constructs that build player experience, that have positive impact on player experience, which are the flow, immersion, and emotions. So we found out that actually the fact that whether a player is enjoying the gameplay was more correlated with how he or she felt during the gameplay. Positive emotions, whether he or she was fully occupied with the game, whether he was thinking about other things, or he was unaware of what is happening around, whether the time passes quickly or not during the gameplay. These were the factors that really build player experience itself. And player experience is positively correlated with reply intention. So the better player experience, the more probably it was that that a player will replay this game. And it turned out that not only during our gameplay they played our game, also afterwards, even if we after filling the questionnaire, some of them continue playing the game. So at least some of the players really enjoyed it. What was interesting to find out that not all the hypotheses were actually supported, especially the ones about perceived level of skills and challenge. Maybe this is the fact about this is because of the game that we used in our experiment, but we really wanted to focus on one game so that the game itself and the gameplay does not have any impact on a player's experience. So we wanted to build this tool based on one game, so that then we can use the questionnaire and the methods that we used in this experiment in future research as well. And as the learning curve is really steep in Pong game, it turned out that the level of skills, the perceived level of skills, did not matter for the players. Then we also used some data from the gameplays to check what really influenced player experience. So not only from the questionnaire, which is showed here in this research, but also all the data from the gameplay. So it turned out that, for example, win-lose ratio also did not really that did not correlate with player experience, or even if they are players, how often do they play games, mobile games in general, also did not really influence their experience. So it turns out that at least with this simple gameplay, mostly the emotions, the flow experience, the immersion, these are the facts that did build their player experience, and then also had a significant and direct effect on replay intention. Summing up, there were...
Sorry to interrupt. Please conclude.
Only 3 factors build player experience in our research. Skills and challenge was not included here in our model. However, with the methods that we used, meaning structural equation modeling, we found out that we can model actually player behavior. So in the future, we want to check whether this model also applies to other games, other gameplays, and not only mobile gaming, but the gaming in general. Thank you for your attention. Do you have any questions?
Thank you, Gosia. It was a very nice presentation. Can you hear me? Can you hear me loud?
Yeah.
Yeah. My question is, like, there are 3 factors that you have highlighted which increases the player's experience: flow, immersion, and emotions. Okay. So as your title suggests, why do people play mobile games? This is your title. So the answer we need is why people play games, like for entertainment, for learning, for diversion, you know. That factor did you mention in your article? Number 1. Number 2, have you also studied that what percentage, or like if you have done the demographic profiling of the mobile user, where particular age respondent is using this much time, do we have a ratio who spends more time in playing the mobile games? Do we have such data with you in your study? 2 questions, yes.
So according to the first question, the game that we used itself in our research was, it is not an example of serious game, so I cannot compare how it is with games that we use just for entertainment and fun and serious games. However, the model that we built actually could be potentially used also for other types of games, also for simulation games, for serious games. So it would be interesting to check how it works with different types of games. However, in this particular experiment, we just concentrated on entertainment games, on this particular game. So it is actually the first step of this research. So we particularly concentrated on one game just to find out whether the tools that we are using, whether the model that we are testing, the mathematical model, works. And now we can do that with other types of gaming. So I do not compare with other types of games because this is something that was not included, but potentially the model can be used. And about the what kind of people play mobile games, and actually in our sample, the players, these were really young people, mainly Polish people. However, it turned out that when we asked them about if they perceive themselves as a gamers or how often do they play games in general, it turns out that here the age or gender did not really matter. And actually they could have a good player experience, no matter what their gender is or no matter how often do they play games. If they can succeed in the game, if the learning curve is really steep, so it does not take much time to learn this game, they actually could have fun and really good player experience, even if they do not play mobile games in general in their everyday life.
Right. Thank you, Gosia. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you very much.
So next paper
If
is
anybody else has some question, otherwise move to the next presenter.
fine. So next paper is paper ID 130, a participatory simulation framework for agent-based model validation in air traffic management.
Yeah, hello. I would like to present my work along with Lucia Herrero Alvarez and Sebastian Meyer, a participatory simulation framework for agent-based model validation in air traffic management. So an overview, I will start with an introduction on air traffic management and on agent-based model in air traffic management, and then move to the study objectives and to the two parts of the framework, the questionnaire and the interviews and the participatory simulation that we use for validation, and conclude with the future work. So what is air traffic management? It's an umbrella term used in aviation for describing all systems that enable an aircraft to depart from an airport, transit the airspace, and eventually land at the destination airport. As a sector is required and expected to stay on top of technological advancements and be an early adopter of technologies. Yet still, technological change in ATM has been slow over the years. So we wanted to use agent-based modeling in ADM, and the reason is that ABM provides us with several advantages, like that we can model agents' heterogeneity, that we can explicitly represent the agents' interactions, that we can endow the agents with non-rational behavior and behavioral biases like loss aversion, and we can model the learning processes, evolutionary behavior, and path dependence. So ABM is not something new. It's been around for several years. So where is the novelty? What we are doing? We have combined three aspects to study the technology adoption in ATM. And these aspects are the organizational point of view, meaning the stakeholders level, the focus on policy testing, and the inclusion of behavioral economic aspects. And especially the last one is, I think, the main novelty of the model. So what are the study objectives? So we have a main objective to design and perform a set of behavioral experiments with stakeholders so we can validate the simulation models. And then on the specific objectives, we first have designed the questionnaire for validating the basic assumptions of the model, particularly the behavioral economic aspects. Then we have designed a participatory simulation process to capture the behavior of the stakeholders. And then the last part is the analysis part. We want to extract useful information that will allow us to validate the model. So to start with the first part, the questionnaires and the interviews, the questionnaire has been developed in 4 parts. In the first part, we try to validate the model assumptions and gather the participants' personal information. In the second part, we present the participants with four different technologies, 2 past technologies and 2 new technologies, and we ask them several questions regarding decision-making and behavioral economics. The third part, we run technologies based on how other participants perceive the answers, and then how the participant thinks that the other participants will answer. And then on the last part, we present the participants with the answer of the other participants, and then we ask them whether they will change now their answer based on that new knowledge. Some preliminary results. We are almost over with this phase, but not completely done. So some preliminary results is that we had an acceptance rate of at least 80%, which we have to verify further that it's plausible. That the past technologies have a slightly highest acceptance rate, which can be found to be true because people tend to go back to what they feel more comfortable that has been succeeded. Some stakeholders like the airports and were more critical to new technologies. That's probably because they are the actual stakeholders that implement these technologies. Along with other, I will not go into much detail, so I will move further with the time that I have. So the second part, which is the participatory simulation that we want to use for validating the model. We start with the question, what do we want to validate? What are we actually going to validate? So it's three parts. The first is the conceptual model. So the premises based on which the model was built, which is the assumptions, the requirements, and particularly the behavioral aspects, which, as I said in the beginning, was the novelty of the model. We validate the data, the source of the data, and the integrity. And the last part is to validate the operational model, so the actual executable model in two levels, one in a system level, meaning in an aggregated level, and one in an individual level, meaning validate the individual agents. For that, we're using two different approaches with several methods. So one informal, mainly through interviews and through stakeholders participating from where we get a more informal validation, more tacit, let's say, knowledge. And then we have the more formal, the more, let's call it mathematical. And we use both because both give us advantages. They also have some disadvantages. So the one covers the other and they supplement each other. So formal, of course, provides hard evidences, but informal, many of you know that can be, not always, but can be equally powerful. And it's human-driven informal, whether formal is data-driven. Let's say the major disadvantage of formal is that it's only synchronous, whether informal can be both synchronous and asynchronous. And of course, informal, and that's its power, let's say, its main advantage is that we can identify relationships that we don't know. Whether with formal, we can only validate what we actually know. So we are validating the model in two levels. The one, as we call it, is playing in the model. So the player assumes a role of the agent. And so the player plays a role, usually the one that they actually also work in real life. And the rest of the agents are played by the model. And the second level is playing with the model. So the player tweaks the parameters of the model, which allows us to have a more overview. And in this particular case, the model is validated in an aggregated level. We also, and that's also something that is, I think, quite novel, let's say, is that we have two modes of play. The one is single player. So one player takes over an agent. The remaining agents are run by the model. And then the player tweaks the parameter of the model to see how the model reacts. In the second mode, which is a multiplayer mode, multiple participants take over multiple agents. Maybe all of the agents, but not necessarily. So if not all of them, then the remaining again are run by the model. The multiplayer has, let's say, the caveat that it's challenging to have multiple players tweaking parameters at the same time. It's difficult, and I will explain later why. Yeah, so we have mainly decided to focus more on the single player because there are several problems that arise with multiple players, some practicals and some more academic, let's say. The more practical is that it's very difficult to logistically coordinate more than 10 professionals at the same time. It's also, again, connected to point one. It would be difficult to run many sessions, so at best we would get 2 or 3 game sessions, which is not bad, but sometimes, and most probably will not, this time also will not be enough to have concrete conclusions. It's difficult to get good results in an aggregated level. So when we have multiple agents tweaking the model, then it will be difficult to trace back the causality. So which decision caused a specific outcome. And practically, it's much more time consuming and much more complicated to build an actual interface for multiple players, especially when we're talking about a digital game. So this is a screenshot, let's say, screenshot of the game. It's in a prototype level. So that's the screenshot where we say that we play in the game. So a participant takes the role of an airline in this particular case. And then they are presented with a game scenario, a specific new technology, and then they have to make certain decisions based on this new technology, like how many aircrafts they will retrofit, and some other decisions based on which they can find calculations of the revenues. And that this one is a screenshot from playing with the game. So that's a more in a macro level. Again, they are presented with a scenario and they change some variables. They can tweak the variables, which you can understand that are more macro. So what's the passenger demand and the fuel price? That's something that affects all stakeholders, not just one specific stakeholder, like in the previous mode. And then again, they run the scenario, how they choose it, and they compare it with the model. So we are currently finalizing the analysis of the results from the questionnaire, and we're also finalizing the development of the participatory simulation. So the next step is to actually have stakeholders from air traffic management to participate and run the experiments. And of course, would want to analyze the results after that and see and make changes if necessary to the simulation, to the agent-based model. That was my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. It was a nice presentation. And my question is, what are the challenges that you are facing or you have faced while implementing this simulation framework for validation?
A few. I would say from a practical point of view is coordinating with different people, especially now that we cannot meet in person. Particularly challenging, that's why we want to do both single player and multiplayer, is the multiplayer mode, so have multiple participants at the same time. For the reason I said, I showed earlier, I think that has been probably the biggest challenge so far. And we want to mitigate that by using also a single player mode. And so we can have, let's say, the best of both worlds.
Right. Thank you. Thank you, Bill.
Thank you.
Yeah, next presenter, please.
The next paper ID is 127, Level Generation and Style Enhancement, Deep Learning for Game Development Overview. So hello, my name is Piotr Migdał, and I would like to talk about deep learning for game development, especially with the focus on image processing. So when it comes to the main motivation, I just need to think. Change this part. So when it comes to the main motivation, is that basically tech advancements change entertainment, games, video, anything, and very often begin creating new genres like advancements in computer graphics. Basically created whole genre of first-person shooters. Right now, there's great progress in deep learning, and even takes a form that's easy to use by regular software engineers. We can use AI in various ways, from increased resolution, as it's already being used, to generating smoke in real time, and also we can use reinforcement learning to basically exploit game physics to see if there are any issues with it. In this talk, I would like to focus on a few things, mostly deep learning for image generation that can be used in game development, on the best models that can be used in games, and algorithms that are easy to use. So basically, we can use them. There are open repositories, they are not closed. And I would like to cover a few methods related to networks, so basically turning vectors into whole images, spread resolution, which is increasing the resolution, style transfer, which is basically changing image style, image translation, which is turning semantic maps into graphics. Semantic segmentation is the opposite, turning images, for example, scanned areas, area maps into semantic maps, and pattern generation, which is extending patterns from a small sample. And one great example is the whole family of generative adversarial networks used in this case, but also in all others, basically. And for example, for creating large-scale realistic images of faces, of drawings, of anything, which can be directly used in content generation. Another one is spread resolution, which is increasing resolution. In this case, like it's examples from human imaging, but can be used for anything when you want to increase the resolution without effort, without any work by graphic designers. And again, it's easy to use, like there are algorithms that you can basically open and run plug and play way. And this thing is also being used for various games, including textures, say for Return of the Castle Wolfenstein, in which case you can already play mode with new high-resolution graphics. It can go even further in the sense that some other algorithms are able to enhance resolution even by a factor of 64 from very pixelated graphics to realistic faces. In this case, we need to be sure that there are some extra assumptions. For example, we know what's a face, and in this case, of course, we are not able to create ideal graphics. We are able to create plausible graphics. So one that is at the same time realistic, but also matches the low-level resolution. In this case, you can see there are 3 different faces which are consistent with the initial one. And this kind of approach is already being used in games, especially if DLSS by NVIDIA. It's used in mainstream games, in AA games, and very often the effort is not only to enhance graphics, but also to increase FPS, very often by a large factor. Another approach is style transfer, which is turning style from one to another. In this case, like I took a screenshot from Doom and applied various styles, and you see with plug and play, we are able to change style.
And again, this is a thing that it's can be applied right now. There's a plugin from Unity that can turn graphics to this style. Very often it's this kind of trippy or dreamy style, yet it can add a lot to the overall experience, again, without any additional effort, without any additional work of graphic designers. Also, it's possible to turn these like simple paint drawings into even into photorealistic images, or if images of any style we want to use in our game. And again, it wasn't possible right now. There are algorithms that basically in which we create only semantic maps, and we are able to create those kind of graphics. There's an opposite problem of turning images, for example, satellite images, area scans, or anything we want to turn into maps. In our case, we want to turn area scans by drones to maps of racetracks. In a typical way, we need to label data. So we need to have maps with both images and data, which is not always the best for video games. Very often we cannot do that way. Even worse, most algorithms work the best for images that are photos, because we use already pre-trained networks, already ones that have been trained on millions or hundreds of millions of images. When it comes to video graphics, it's very often very different. It's symbolic, artistic, or anything different. And for example, if you take a screenshot from the famous Minesweeper, if you try to use a typical neural network, it thinks it's a monitor or a screen because it recognizes pixelated graphics and thinks that it's something like that. And we cannot use it that easily to work with graphics from our games, unless it's photorealistic. But there is a way around that. And there are algorithms that use so-called self-supervised and unsupervised image segmentation, in which way we don't need to provide any data. We just take images and turn them into maps. In our algorithm, which is an improvement over Tel2Vec and Patch2Vec, we are able to take a single image and turn it into a map. So in this case, you see also one image from SimCity, and you see that it separates water from buildings from grass. But in practice, we use that for turning area scans of real racetracks into images in which you can look at high detail, which is, for example, the whole tracks, but also look at particular things, for example, tires, even with the angle and the density. And the last one I want to talk about is extending patterns, which is in this case, again, like a single picture, and it's with no other data. We provide a single picture, and we are able to create much larger pattern, preserving the same kind of structure and visuals. And again, in this case, can be used for both extending textures, but also extending whole maps. But when you can start with a single sample, create something much more, you can generate it on fly, or you can create it so to save our time for generating content. And so when it comes to the whole array of methods, like this, of course, much larger, but ones we found which are used or can be used right now for image generation, image creation, image enhancement are those. And the main question for you is basically—
Sorry to interrupt. Please
sure.
conclude. Please conclude.
Of course, yes. It's exactly on time. So the main question is like, which deep learning method would enhance your game? Would add to gameplay? You would add to style, or to save time of the developers? And thank you. If you want to ask any questions, please go on, and I will send a link to these very slides in the chat.
I'll request the audience to ask the question, because the presentation was very nice. And how now in all the games, the deep learning is being used. So I think the majority of the portion that you have demonstrated in your presentation is the deep learning is the main or both machine learning and deep learning?
Okay, so when it comes to images, it's basically all deep learning. So for state-of-the-art images, we have to use deep learning, otherwise it's not top-notch. Right now, it's being this super resolution DLSS is being used in many games. So including Cyberpunk, Metro Exodus, and quite a few other AA games. When it comes to other things, basically we are just getting started, and to my knowledge, most game developers are not aware of their advancements, and also they are not aware it's that easy to use by people even with no background in data science, machine learning. It only requires some background in software engineering, well, which is required basically for game development.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And so any questions from the panelists? Fine. So the next. So
next. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you.
So next paper ID is 135. Experimental research, the simulation-based learning effectiveness in educating and system.
Did you hear me well now?
Yes, very much.
Thank you for your introduction. Thank you, the organizing committee, for giving me the chance to present our review result at the conference today regarding the effectiveness of simulation and serious game in educating for sustainability. And by the way, I'm still stuck in Vietnam due to the pandemic, so I also present the research today on my co-author behalf, Professor Philip Hallinger. First of all, I would like to talk a little bit about the origin of the paper. Last year, we published a bibliometric review on the use of simulation in serious game on Journal of Cleaner Production, and we was able to identify numbers of conceptual and methodological gaps in the literature. And that's why we wanted to continue in this work. The presentation today, I will talk about what we have been know about the effectiveness of the simulation in serious game in educating for sustainability. What's the key question for today, and how I identify and analyze the data. And the second half of the presentation, I will focus on the key findings from our review and recommendation for future research. So what we have know about the effectiveness of simulation in serious game. First of all, when we think about the effect, we think about the behavioral change. And researchers have used plant behavior to understand and to predict the sustainable behavior in intervention. But should we expect the same mechanism in the gaming session? Or it can be different? Or the second question is that whether I study intention or behavior, because from our literature review, researchers are more likely to study intention rather than the behavior, because intention is like a strong predictor of behavior. It does the same in the gaming or simulation session. And the third question is about the knowledge. When we think about the behavioral change, people use the framework of attitude, intention, and behavior. So how about the knowledge? Is it worth spending time and money developing a gaming session to develop the knowledge in sustainability, or we just use other traditional teaching methodology, right? And it's also about the research design. From our prior review, we discovered that the majority of the approaches in the simulation in games are commentary and conceptual. So how we can validate the effects of the simulation session if we don't use the experimental or quasi-experimental? Is other factors that contribute to effectiveness as well, but today I will not cover, just focus on the 4 factors that I have talked about. So this is the data we published last year, and you could see here the percentage of experimental and quasi-experimental in the field is very small. It's just less than 10%. So we extracted a non-empirical and non-experimental study out of the database. So we have total 35 eligible study for analysis. The key question I want to present today is what the main characteristic of experimental research in the field and what we can conclude about the effectiveness of the simulation and serious game. Okay, the first finding that the research design, when you look at this figure, you could see the dominance of the quasi-experimental design, and especially the pretest and post-test quasi-experimental design. They tell a lot about the field that we cannot say that the use of quasi-experiment is flawed in this field, because like only 30% of study use experimental design. And they say that it's still very challenging for researchers in the field to achieve the randomization, especially when a new teaching or learning method like simulation-based learning is introduced the first time in the classroom. And the second thing, when we analyze the outcome variables, we were very surprised because the most common variable to be studied in the field is knowledge. It's not behavior as we thought about. And researchers, when they study behavior, they study actually and also intended behavior in both gaming simulated setting, but as well the reality setting. And when you see here, the minority of the study like focus on intention. So this is very opposite compared with other like sustainability study in general. This is very surprising. So is it not true to conclude intentional variable are more studied over behavior in gaming and simulation setting specifically? And so what we can conclude about the effectiveness on learning variables, first, we observe the tendency to significant result in majority of the tests. You can see here the significant positive findings have been observed on those variables. However, the effect size reported on those main findings are much smaller. And on average, we found that it just 57% of the study didn't report the effect size. Even this is very practical element of experimentation. And this makes it very hard for the reader or the researcher in future to replicate or to ensure the practical meaning of the treatment on the learning outcome. So, but that is a good thing. There's also a good thing, despite the limited numbers of effects are reported, the findings also show that the medium to large size significant effects on learning outcomes in most adequately designed study. For example, the improvement in sustainability, knowledge, and attitude by using simulation in games could be better than other approaches from medium to large size amount. And how about behavior? When we study effects on the sustainable behavior, most of the effect size metric is extracted from complex model. This indicates that researchers are likely to study behavior in the relationship with other behavior in the treatment.
It's 3 o'clock.
Rather than the direct effect from the treatment on the behavior. But this is something we also consider a very potential finding, is that there's a difference between the effect size on the in-game and actually behavior. And I could suggest that there could be more empirical evidence in future research to consider if simulation or gaming treatment cause bigger effect in game behavior than the one in reality. For intention, because you see like very just limited evidence in our database to conclude the significant effects of the treatment in general on the user intention. So there could be some reason why like intention is less study. It needed to take the conceptualization into account because unlike many behaviors, many other variables cannot straightforward to be observed or measured directly, or they have to use like more advanced analytical technique to study. So to conclude, I would like to say that the significant effects of the simulation in serious game on sustainability variables, it depends on the conceptual measure before taxing variable operational. The model of experimental design based on the context, the analytical methods, and especially the report of the effect size metric to ensure the practical meaning of the treatment. So finally, the final word I want to send to the conference attendant is that it's very important that a set of experimental principles needed well defined before the researcher collect data, and they need to interpret them convincingly after that. Thank you for your listening. Do you have any question?
In your study,
it's a muting.
Dr. George, you are on mute.
What is the sample size that you have taken to study the effectiveness? How many institutions have you studied?
Sorry, you mean the sample size?
Yeah, sample size. Yeah.
Okay. The sample size are from the beginning like 376 study on Scholar, like mostly from Scholar Index and Google Scholar, and we extracted the percentage of experimental design out of that sample to study the effectiveness.
Right. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. I think this was the last presentation.
Yes, sir. This is the last presentation.
Okay.
So I like to invite our session chair for the concluding remarks.
Yeah. At the very outset, I would like to thank Honorable Vice Chancellor and Chairperson of ISAGA 2021 for providing me this great opportunity to be a part of this fourth technical session on 9th September. And it was a great learning experience. All the presentations were quite informative, and they have tried to do new research in their different areas. So there were 7 papers presented in this technical session 4. First was WHE CMEX facilitating trainee simulation for health emergency personnel, presented by Tumos Harvanian. He, in his paper, presented observing competency through behavior competency based assessment aid in the exercise through virtual training simulation exercise. With this paper, he tried to highlight how the simulation exercise can help identify various symptoms and treatment on certain specific disease related measures, and it was also supported by World Health Organization. The second paper presented was between urban resilience and serious gaming, applying games for policy implementation. Paper presented by Veronika Satskovska, and she presented policies for urban resilience. She tries to highlight community resilience, climate change, and how it can contribute to effective policy implementation. It was a very nice presentation by her. And the third presentation was made by Dr. Mizuho Sato on the topic design of knowledge sharing game for sustainable restaurant management. She shared that by using knowledge sharing games, reduction of food waste can be achieved and sales can be increased. She also outlined the knowledge sharing effect also, and it can increase the communication between the customer and the makers, chefs, and the entire restaurant fraternity. So it was a very effective paper presented by her. And the next paper presented by Gosia Swill. Why do people play mobile games? She highlighted various factors that influence mobile players' experience and their intention to replay the game. It was a quasi-experiment through Pong game, wherein she concluded that there were three construct, flow, immersion, and emotions, played a vital role in increasing the player's experience. And the next presentation was by Bill Rongas on the topic of participatory simulation framework for agent-based model validation in air traffic management, where he tried to present the design and perform a set of behavioral experiment with ATM stakeholders, wherein 8 ATM experts representing 10 different agents. And he also highlighted participatory simulation for validation, and which is it is under process, and I think after validation he'll be using it on a larger scale and for other stakeholders also. The next presentation was on the topic level generation and style enhancement, deep learning for game development overview, presented by Piotr Migdal. In this paper, the authors present 7 approaches to create level maps, each using statistical methods, machine learning, or deep learning, where the experience on the styles can be improved through deep learning and machine learning. And the last presentation was experimental research, the simulation-based learning effectiveness in education for sustainability, in which the takeaway can be that simulation and gaming has a significant effect on learning outcomes. So these were the papers presented in the 4th technical session. I once again thank you all the presenters and all the participants present in this 4th technical session. And I thank the entire organizing team of ISAGA. I could see architect Vishal Yadi sir, and thank you Abhishek Singh ji, and all the Dr. Dumblekar, Dr. Jigyasu Dubey. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. George. Thank you very much.
Okay. On behalf of the Shri Vaishnav Vidyapit Vishwavidyalaya, Indore, I like to thank our session chair, all the respected dignitaries, and the other participants. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you, Dr. Jigyasu. Can we leave?
Yes, sir. Thank you very much.